Thank you very much. Thank you for enduring all the warm-up acts today to come for the big headline act you've all been waiting for, the final panel of the day. This is us, we're here. As the Vice President explained, we're here to talk about the CCS directive and the EFTA's role, the role of national authorities in ensuring a harmonious application of that. I can recommend to you EFTA's report on here. If if you want a signed copy from Melina, she'll give it to you outdoors. This is the work of the authority on the application of the directive. Just a reminder, we're going to have a conversation up here, much like the panel before, and I'll reserve some time at the end for questions. So please think about it, put your hand up, let us know who you are, and we'd love to hear from you towards the end. Also, I'd like to actually give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves. It's always a bit boring if I read out their CVs and so forth. So I'm going to give them a chance, to say who they are and what their, role is in CCS. I'm Lewis Crofts. My favourite colour is blue. My hobbies are, horse riding, and my favourite CCU product is Fanta. So maybe Jonine, if you want to go first.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jónína Lárusdóttir. My favorite color is red. I am a director of the Internal Market Affairs Directorate at the EFTA Surveillance Authority, and we deal with everything that has to do with the internal market of the EEA, ranging from transport, telecoms, food and veterinary. Then we have the 4 freedoms, then we have environment and energy, and then we have financial services. And we are 39. And for our friends in the Commission, we correspond to roughly 13 DGs. And we are also taking decisions based on drafts from the agencies. So this is what we do. In terms of CCS, we have the traditional monitoring role, as Árni Páll mentioned. We are checking whether Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein have implemented and applied the CCS directive in a correct manner. But more importantly, maybe for this context, we are also issuing an opinion on the permit or the draft permit that the national authority that Sigrún is representing from Iceland will issue. So that is our role as regards the CCS.
Thank you, Sigrún.
Okay, my name is Sigrún Ágústsdóttir. I'm the Director General of the Environment Agency of Iceland since 2020. I've been working with environmental issue for now over 20 years, both at ministry level and the agency level. What the role of the agency is in regard to carbon capture is that we work on the licenses. We issue licenses on carbon capture. We also issue licenses for industry polluting activities. We have an inspection unit. We manage ETS. We also are responsible for the national inventory of Iceland regarding the climate figures and our climate obligations. So it's a quite wide range of obligations. Where the agency also manages nature conservation. So we have the broad picture, so to say. Favorite color is blue.
Excellent. Well dressed for the day. Excellent. Bora.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Børre Jacobsen, and I am the Managing Director of Northern Lights. In respect of my background, I have 30 years of experience from Shell. I have worked there primarily in the commercial business development sector, mostly with gas, natural gas and LNG. So a lot of commercial work, which I think is very relevant for the role I'm doing now. I've been with Northern Lights since we started, actually since a little bit before we started, for 3.5 years ago. And it's been a fascinating journey, and I hope I can talk a little bit more about Northern Lights in a few moments. Thank you.
Favorite color?
Oh, it has to be purple.
Okay, Excellent. I could see there's a massive harmonization opportunity here for favorite colors.
And when you see the picture of our chips, you'll understand why I said that.
Martha.
My name is Martha Roggenkamp, to say it in Dutch, or Roggenkamp as you like it. And I feel a bit out here with all these Scandinavians here from the EFTA countries. But I have an excuse. I have a Norwegian mother. So that's why I'm allowed to be here. Okay, I'm an emeritus professor of energy law of the University of Groningen, currently also an honorary professor of the University of Po in France. And yes, my entire working life I've been dealing on energy law, from upstream oil and gas law. My PhD was on pipe transportation of oil and gas, electricity, well, whatever, and carbon capture and storage. I've looked it up, and our first publication on that was from 2009. So it's not 30 years as the entire as ASA and the sector, but we been quite a long time on CCS, several book chapters and other chapters, and we were involved in 2 programs on CCS. It was a Dutch Cato program. Maybe some of you are aware of it, where we had a PhD researcher, a postdoc, and a researcher. And afterwards, the Align project, where we actually were focusing on the reuse of installations for the purpose of actually carbon storage. Well, that's in a nutshell, I think. Oh yeah, and my paper color. Well, as a Dutch person, I have to say orange.
Excellent, excellent. Bora, your wish is my command. Yeah, tell us a little bit. The company's come up several times so far today. First mover advantage, the risks, the innovations, and so forth. Tell us what you're up to and where the sector's going.
Yes, thank you. So, Northern Lights, we have taken our name and actually quite a bit of inspiration of this captivating natural phenomenon, as Northern Lights, with its mesmerizing rays of light. And what we are doing is we are developing the world's first open source CO2 transportation and storage infrastructure. And being the first, that actually does, this project will enable industry to take responsibility for their own emissions, which they haven't been able to do to a significant extent. So, and the Northern Lights, of course, in previous time, that was seen as magic or maybe some spirits that caused this phenomenon. And today we, of course, know the technical basis for Northern Lights and why it occurs. And I think this is the same with CCS today. We know the technical basis of doing carbon transportation and storage safely. Greta here on the stage talked about the experience with Equinor and showcased, and we have brought that experience, Equinor being one of our owners, to our company. So we know what to do, and we can then offer this as a service now to the industry, and through that bring the CO2 back, or the carbon back, to where it belongs. We are a joint venture. We are owned by Equinor, mentioned already, Shell and Total Energies. And we have been able to capitalize on their experience as we take the project. Very briefly, where we are. We took our investment decision back in 2020-21. We are this year finalizing the first phase of our development. That is, by the end of the year, we are ready to receive CO2. That is, our wells are done. Our pipeline are done, the terminal we're building outside Bergen is finished, and we will have 2 ships ready by the end of the year. We'll expect to start operations as soon as Heidelberg Materials start taking their CO2, and I hope that's going to be very soon in 2025, so that we can go and get going and show that this is actually working.
Just for comparative purposes, investment decisions in 2021 and coming online this year, is that, in your experience in the industry, is that a short or a long or about right, or how do you sense that duration?
Actually, that's super quick. It was even before the state funding arrangement was in place. The 3 owners had a cooperation agreement together and took a lot of decisions, like drilling the first well to prove the reservoir would work. So it's gone quite quick, but there was a discussion in the previous panel on how much time it takes, and I'm fully with Greta when she said it takes 6 years, but before those 6 years, it takes 4 years from a geologist start looking at the spot on the map till you inject the first molecule of CO2, you can expect 8 to 10 years. And I think that is something to bring with us as we do. There are a lot of reasons for that, and I can understand it goes quicker onshore because the drilling process takes quite a long time. So that's easily a couple of years extra compared to what Edda talked about. But this takes time. And I think we'll come back in this panel discussion a bit on also why it takes time. Part of it is regulatory, but it's also about doing proper work. The model we saw out there, which is, I just think it's absolutely fantastic. And thank you very much to University of Bergen for coming here and showing it. And I think that sort of, you have to prove as much as you can that those conditions reflect what you have in the underground. And of course, no one can see what's happening down there. I don't know what those two people who had seen the subsurface was referring to, but you cannot get 2,600 meters below the seabed to have a look. We would like to, but that is not possible.
Thank you. So we've heard the industry perspective, Janina. That's what's happening on the ground or under the sea. You're tasked with applying in a uniform fashion the CCS directive. Perhaps you could give us some insight into how you go about doing that and how it fits into work on other energy policies.
Yeah, as I said before, I mean, in CCS, we are both doing the traditional surveillance work. So we are monitoring whether the implementation or the application is correct. But ESA has changed a lot during the last 10 years. We have been invested with various tasks that we call regulatory or management tasks. One of them is this, that we issue an opinion of a draft permit for the CCS. And how do we do that? We built on our experience in this field. We gave for example, opinion on the certification of Statnett last year. And we built on that experience. So we strive to have a very close cooperation with all our partners. That means the national competent authorities, also the Commission, and the ministries if there is a question of implementation. And we try, I mean, our common goal is to reach a positive conclusion. So we want to sort of think about all the questions and sort of come to a conclusion on those questions before we reach a conclusion. Maybe also with the Commission, there we are having meetings every 6 weeks to sort of exchange ideas and questions. The cooperation with the Commission in this field is quite interesting because we have 4 runners in Iceland and Norway. So we bring to the table, you know, novel questions, maybe that the Commission has not dealt with, which is not always the case, I have to say, when ESA is asking the Commission about something. Sometimes it's something that they have come across before. So we have been emphasizing this close cooperation in order to come to a positive conclusion in the end.
Just give us some insight into one of these opinions. How do you structure it? You know, what's your frame of reference? You know, these things, they're quite new. How do you go about it?
They are so new that we haven't issued anyone. So I can't really tell you how they are. I mean, the Commission has issued some opinions. Usually we go about it, you know, the same way. We strive to sort of enhance the homogeneity in practice also within the EA. So if you have a look at the opinions of the Commission, then you can maybe have some idea how they will look like.
Sigrun, on to you. You're obviously responsible for the permitting process in Iceland, which is a key moment. You've got the opinion sort of casting a shadow over you, or hopefully maybe casting sunlight over you. But how do you go about the permitting process in the nation?
Well, we will do this pretty much in the same way as we do usually. We are more used to handling applications from industry polluting some chemicals. But now the main goal is to capture something and to trap it into stone. So this is an innovation service, of course, a little bit different. No, I am not particularly stressed by overwhelmed by Jonina's approach. I'm just excited and curious. And this is very exciting to provide a new service kind of to the industry. And I think we have to define innovation service, especially in the administration, because it needs a little bit different service than the traditional cases, I think. And we have to work across agency and cross ministry much better than we do. And this is all new, and we have to decide how we are going to share the responsibility of that everything is new. And it's a little bit uncertain ground we are standing on, right? I think at the former panel came, discussed this a little bit, because, this is uncertain ground a little bit. The Carbfix company has worked closely with his sister company, ON, which makes the cooperation stronger, I guess, and they have developed substantial expertise. And I think we might need a different service and more service to companies who are less developed, have less support, maybe. So this is the new times for the administration, and we have to be more swift and flexible. I'm thinking out loud. I haven't developed all of this service, but the dream is to make a unit who is can work across the whole administration. And we have to think about also how we look at the project before they come into the license agencies, all the preparation in whole context, the assessment of the project and so on. So,
Give us a sense of the timelines.
Well, the general timeline is about 8 months for a permit, but this is very unique process where we have to send it to ESA, as Jonina mentioned, and can prolong the process up to 4 months. I don't think that's exactly what an innovation company needs, a prolonging of the process. But we tend to do this when we have something new. We add an opinion. But in the future, I think we might have more predictability, because those opinions will be transparent and on the internet, right? Yes, and we will learn from it. It's learn as we go everywhere. So I think the industry will have a more predictability in the future. Yeah.
Do you offer sort of early engagement with people considering requests, to help them along the way, like a sort of almost a pre-notification stage, to help you talk about smaller companies, perhaps with fewer resources and their ability to engage with you early before any formal process starts?
Well, we have a general guidance obligation, so a company can pretty much contact us when they want. So that's possible.
So Bori, sit there, it's an innovation service, they want to go quicker. I know it's a different country, but how was your permitting experience, or how's it been?
So, well, first of all, I can assure all the regulators in the room that my hair was quite gray before I started working in CCS. So I cannot blame it on them. It hasn't improved, by the way, but no, joking aside, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that we need regulations, so we couldn't start without. So the fact that we had the storage directive implemented back in 2012 gave, of course, a certain predictability as to what we were to be, how we could develop this business. But having said that, the regulations, they basically started with the oil and gas regulation, because that's what they knew and had experience with. So that was, and as been pointed out, there are obviously similarities to storing CO2 offshore with oil and gas extraction. So they started with oil and gas, and then they just added what was specific for CO2, and I'm simplifying a little bit. So we have a more stringent regulations than the super duper profitable oil and gas business has. And that goes through everything we do, from the onshore facilities, pipeline wells, etc. So I think we need, as we develop this business and want to scale up, we actually need to have a step back and say, and take out the things which is not relevant, because oil and gas is products that is highly flammable, they're explosive. And when you handle those products under pressure, it is the potential for accident, if things go wrong, which they fortunately almost never do, is pretty dramatic. But CO2 is a fire extinguisher. So your approach to how can things go wrong should be based on the fact that the product you handle. And then there's one other thing which is challenging for businesses who start up in this sector. That is that you have national regulations, of course, and you have the EU. But in our case, before we invest, we have to have our project approved by the Norwegian government. And you have a fairly sophisticated process to go through that actually goes to the parliament. And then once you've done that and you started investment, then before you start injection, you actually need another permit. On what? Why? And here's the point. The permit that we have that is currently under consideration by ESA and the Norwegian authorities, it took us a year and a half to write it. It is a significant complex document in the subsurface development, laying out in detail everything that you saw on the map. How are we going to monitor? What are we doing every year out? The time span of that work is the next 80 years. And of course, we all know that things are going to change on the way. And that is one of the good things with CO2 storage. You can adapt. If you see things doesn't go the way you think, you can adapt. But it's all up front. So we have to do all that, which oil companies don't even have to do. So we have to do all that work up front, putting in where there's still a lot of uncertainties on everything. So I think we should actually bring the work forward to the investment decision at the same time. I think this is a critical help, that you do that work, and on that basis you go forward, and you don't have several steps to get to your storage permit.
I'm just going to come to Martha in 1 second, but Janina would like to respond to something.
No, I just maybe wanted to clarify that according to the directive, we have 4 months to give an opinion on the draft permit. But I mean, as it currently stands, we haven't received any draft permit, but we are working with the competent authorities in order to be able to achieve our objectives, and we would like to issue this opinion as soon as possible. I mean, I can understand sort of the criticism or the points that come about sort of the timing of all this, but I just sort of wanted to emphasize also that we are bureaucrats here in Brussels, so we just enforce the law that is put in front of us, and we don't really have any sort of opinion on that as an institution, but we are really putting a lot of emphasis on these projects. As I was saying, we only have 39 people working for the whole of the internal market. So we are prioritizing every day. And this is one of the projects that we are really putting a lot of effort with our best experts in the field to work on.
I'll let you quickly respond to that before Martha, just
just a quick comment, because we recognize that regulators regulate according to regulations. So that is basically what you do. So this was not a criticism of ESA or the Norwegian Environmental Directorate, because they are trying, and we are also inventing the road as we go along on both sides. So we have, and I should have said, we have a constructive dialogue between us. My point was more in general, when we take learnings from this process, we should see if we can put that permit up front before the investment decision, and then also simplifying to what is really needed.
Beautifully diplomatic. Martha, so we've heard a lot from both sides now about how the CCS directive is applied, where some of the frictions may be. What's your sort of report card for the directive?
Well, I have a number of comments. I think it's maybe also interesting to point out that when we started to work or started to think about carbon storage, that was even before the CCS directive. And I think that was the case in the UK and also in the Netherlands and also to some extent in Norway. because that was legislation where it also already was some sort of a storage regime in place. So when we got the CCS directive, I mean, it is still based on the similar principles, but added with some other elements like the monitoring, like the transfer of responsibility, etc., etc. And what I think is interesting when you talk about also speeding up is that there are two permits, and there's an exploration permit and a storage permit. But the Netherlands has not made use of an exploration permit. We go immediately to the storage permit because we make use of depleted oil and gas fields so that the technical information about the reservoir, etc., is available. And that means that you can directly apply to a storage permit. And I think that also speeds up the process enormously. And it's just, I think, by coincidence that Northern Light was, or Longship was a little bit before we had our Portus project, but because that's just 1 year later. But anyway, you also said that onshore it will go quicker. I will assure you it's not going to go quicker onshore because the first carbon storage project we had in the Netherlands was the Barendrecht project. And it's all was a problem about acceptance. So I think, and you see that also with wind turbines. I mean, we go offshore because we have less public that can be annoyed, etc., etc. So I'm not, I mean, maybe from a technical perspective, it could be quicker, but I don't think with the entire permitting process and the go ahead, it will not be quicker. No.
Sidron, perhaps come to you. I mean, you also don't have exploration permits in Iceland, is that correct? The exploration, Martha said that in the Netherlands you skip a step. It's the same in Iceland, isn't it? Yeah.
This is the only country where we go immediately to storage permits. All the others have exploration permits. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I think Iceland needs storage as well. And so, what would you change then? What's from the directive? It's 2009. It's quite an old piece of legislation.
Change. Well, I mean, I don't have too much to say in this matter, actually. But what I do see at the moment is, I mean, awarding the storage permit, that is not the big issue. I mean, that goes, I think, at least what I've seen, relatively smoothly. What I see is who are the parties involved. So maybe some of you are also familiar with the road project, and that was the idea. We have an electricity emitters, and they are involved in the pipeline project and in the storage. So it was a point-to-point project. So that didn't work out. So we are now really looking at these open access projects, as you also better explained now. What I do see in the Netherlands is the entire issue of actually getting access. And because the regime under the directive is relatively broadly phrased, you need to negotiate on the basis of non-discriminatory, transparent, objective criteria. And that is negotiations. And then if you are not succeeding and you would have the idea that the pipeline operator or the storage operator would abuse the dominant position, you can go to the competition authority and say, well, this is an abuse of market position, etc., etc. And I think there now the problem lies, at least what I see in the Netherlands and maybe also elsewhere. Do we need more information about what these tariffs actually should be? When is it? Yeah, what should it be? What can we ask for? And you see now there is an enormous discussion is, do we need to have more guidance on the tariffs? Can we go directly to the competition authority? And I think there is something that really needs to be changed. What you also see is in the directive, which is quite interesting, actually. The directive itself is focusing on pipe transportation. Because there are very, very few provisions in the directives about transportation, and those that are there talking about environmental impact assessment, and they talk about emissions permits. Well, I don't think need an environmental impact assessment when you ship CO2, except for maybe some harbors or whatever. So the focus has really been on pipe transportation. We see now that it is getting broader in scope, more transportation modes, etc. So I think there also maybe we could need some more guidance or more information or rules or whatever.
I mean, the concept of fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory pricing or access in this instance, FRAND is quite common. It's usually dealt with inter partes. The regulator, competition authority doesn't like to come in and set a price. It just lets the market arrive at the parties arrive at a respectable price. It sounds like you don't have faith that that's going to work.
I only can note that there is a discussion going on. What you also see is that a lot of these parties are now so used to the rules we have under the Electricity and Gas Directive with regulated access. So what you see is a lot of these parties, the only thing they know is regulated access. They have almost no experience with anything else anymore. So they, oh, let's have regulated access, but at least that gives us regulatory certainty. So, but I want to say, sir, I note now in the Netherlands there is an enormous discussion about how this need to be to be organized.
Barbara, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I think everyone who is getting into this business recognize that it will develop, and we actually that's what we work. We hope it will develop into a business, but I also think it's. Whereas I fully agree with the principles here, there is no market. I mean, there is no market. I've been accused of being a monopolist before I had a single contract. I mean, yeah, but somebody has to be first. Somebody has to start, and so I think there's a sequence. Once a market is starting to take up a certain level of activity, then it's natural to start regulating it, particularly where you have a lot of infrastructure. I hear a lot of people talking about access, but they are very quiet when it comes to paying upfront money to invest and taking risk. Then they are out of the room very quickly. So who's going to pay? Who's going to take the risk of investing in that infrastructure? So I followed the project that Greta talked about very, very carefully because we think this is it will be a combination of pipelines and ships for CCS. I'm very convinced of that. And here you start with a very, very big upfront investment. It will be I think it will develop into open access, but you also have to pay. Somebody has to pay at the end of the day, and we cannot ask the EU or even the Norwegian state to pay for all of it. There's a limit. So to me, I think it is a natural sequence. As we invest and as you build infrastructure, I think the expectation is down the road, it will be regulated. And also on prices, it is not possible for me to give a price because the price depends on the structure. How much CO2? How much flexibility? What is the shipping distance? How many years? All that is coming into play when you discuss also the price. Once we have our pipelines and a handful of projects, I think again you will see commoditization, you will see a spot price emerging, but you cannot expect that from the beginning. It's just there's a sequence of things. Is my main point.
Joni, I just come to you. You've heard the debate about access terms. In fact, the Vice President also mentioned fair access in his speech. Is it something that's on ISA's radar, or is it still too early, like Boris implied?
Yeah, that is not really what we are focusing on now. We are sort of in the early stages of issuing this opinion. So yeah,
not there yet.
No.
Sorry, Martha, you look like you're going to pounce.
Yes, wondering whether I may add something to make it more complicated. Is it okay if I make it more complicated? Yes? Okay, because a lot of CO2 is used for industrial purposes. If I look at the Netherlands, I mean, we use CO2 for the soft drink industry, for the beer industry, I think, for the fire extinguishers. But particularly in the Netherlands, we use a lot of CO2 for our greenhouse growers to grow our cucumbers and our tomatoes and whatever. So we have 300 kilometers of CO2 pipelines in the Netherlands to bring CO2 to greenhouse growers. Interesting enough, those are on a different legal regime than the pipelines that bring CO2 to the storage, permanent storage. So, for example, pipelines for the greenhouse growers, they don't need an environmental impact assessment. They don't need to have an emission permit in case maybe CO2 is going to escape. So that makes a little bit strange that we have two different regimes for two different pipelines. And now they are considering also on the longer term to maybe integrate the pipeline systems to bring the CO2 also from the emitters to maybe the Rotterdam harbor before it gets offshore, etc., etc. But I also see some people now writing down, okay, but if we're now going to store so much CO2, what about the CO2 we need as a commodity? And I'm just wondering to which extent we need to actually integrate regimes that someone can actually use the CO2, because now it is, for example, a refinery, if he captures the CO2 and brings it elsewhere, he still has to submit its allowances, although it is not emitted, but because the receiver, he has no emission allowances or emission permit. So should we not integrate the system so that anyway that you can still use the CO2 for whatever purpose, and that maybe in the next stage it's going to be stored again? I don't know how. I'm not sure how can you actually capture CO2 from cucumbers. I don't think so. Well, anyway, but I mean, it's just to make it a little bit more complicated, that you don't want to facilitate one industry and then making it more difficult for another industry, because where they use the CO2 is also a very important policy goal, and that is actually energy savings. Because instead of firing gas to make CO2, they get the CO2 directly from refineries, etc., etc. So just to make it a little bit more complicated for you.
Thanks very much. As you were talking, a gentleman put his hand up in the middle because he knows exactly how to capture CO2 from cucumbers. So, sir, in the middle. Yeah. Yeah, just.
I thought you were joking, but of course,
no.
Paul has the answer. And any colleagues in the room who want to jump on the mic, also let us know.
I definitely don't want to dominate, but I'm the Norwegian man again, and it was whispered to me that we should use it in Prosecco. Now, I would like to ask a question to the director of the IMA of ESA, Jonina Larusdottir, because you're the man sitting next to you, Northern Lights. He, from what we understand, has a project with a price tag of 2 billion euro approximately for the Northern Lights, of which he received 1.8 billion from the Norwegian government. That is, according to what he said, there's few people who can pay for this, so there must be some public support up front. We all know that. We want this technology to succeed. But my question relates to the ESA's work in this field, because I did read that state aid grant to Northern Lights, which I must compliment to you. It was one of the best ever reports I've read on CCS. It describes the full value chain of every aspect of what it takes in order to grant this huge investment, of course, which is important. But my question is, why was every figure in that marked with black? Just in the days of the Soviet Union, when you received a letter from the West, you know, all the figures were censored. Now, if you, in the EU, there is a principle that if you actually receive public funding, you are obliged to share, and I think even Børre Jacobsen mentioned open source, all the information, all the details, in order to ensure that the publicly supported technology will actually be promulgated and copied, and we get the kind of cost discoveries and price reductions that we all are so keen to see. So my long question, I'm sorry, I'll stop now. Why can't we have the cost estimates to help this technology work?
Thank you, Lewis. Do you want?
Let's deal with that one briefly while we're here. It's probably a short answer.
A short answer, because I didn't have anything to do with that decision. IMA didn't have anything to do with that. As a bureaucrat, I will point to. There are a few people here in the room that worked on that decision. My former colleague here as well. So the compliments go to him and his team. As regards the numbers, I can't really say. I mean, the only thing I can say in general terms is that we have rules on public access to documents where we cannot reveal all the information that is sometimes asked for. But as I say, very short answer to your question in that respect.
I'll just give Bora a chance to comment on that if you'd like.
Yes, I didn't have anything with that reduction to do either, by the way. But just the number that was quoted was actually the full Longship project. So Northern Lights is a part of that, not all of it. So it's a bit little less than what you said. It's more like half. But and the state support agreement is fully public. So so it is. There are some pieces that were taken out, but in general, the whole arrangement, and that's part of the answer, because the support is not like you get one. It's not very straightforward. There are certain funds you get for the investment phase. There are certain funds you get for the operations phase, and then there are certain other things that can happen, etc., etc. So it's a little bit more complex than just black and white. Having said that, we have received a significant 80% of the cost of the phase 1 of Northern Lights is paid by the Norwegian state, and 20% for the 3 owners. At that stage, remember, the ETS price was 20 euro per ton. There was absolutely no one, I think, at the table who even could think that it would go up to 80, 100, and that it could be already at this early commercial, the possibility to do commercial agreement. So it was a bet, and I think the state support was absolutely critical to make it happen, and there were a long period of negotiations to reach a risk settlement, and even then it was a tough call for the 3 owners to cough up the remaining 20%. So it was, and I think that was a model that worked to start the first project. I think it's not I don't think it's replicable for the next one, because it was the point to prove the value chain.
Thanks very much. We'll come back to get a few more questions from the audience in a second. I just wanted to deal with one separate issue which we were discussing over coffee in the break, which is about the bilateral agreements, about the London Protocol has got it all sorted. Don't worry, we don't need a bilateral agreement, or the opposite of that, Martha.
It's with the London Protocol, it's sorted that we are allowed to transport CO2 cross-border. That's the only thing it actually says, I think. What is still, I think it's interesting to see that the CCS directive says that captured CO2 is not a waste, and under the London Protocol it is a waste. But I mean, that's just we have to take as it is. But I would say maybe not a bilateral agreement, but I mean, if you have a CO2 pipeline, and I'm more than the pipelines and the ships actually better, but if you have a CO2 pipeline crossing several continental shelves, I would argue you need to have some sort of a treaty or an agreement where all parties agree on who is actually doing the monitoring where, who is taking care, who is monitoring safety, what happens if there is an emission where in the pipeline, who is taking responsibility for that. So I think you need something there. It's not sufficient to say, okay, you can transport cross-border, now we have solved the problem. No, it's just the first step. And I would argue, I mean, you could even talk about some sort of a North Sea cooperation agreement or whatever, or do you have some sort of a standard treaty in place? And you could even fall back on all the Norwegian treaties we had since the gas production and the transport via pipelines to Germany and Belgium and the UK, because they have to some extent been copied all the time afterwards. So you have some sort of a basis you can use. You have to translate it for CO2. And I don't think that has to be so time consuming. And I assume it will solve a lot of problems later on, because you better spend a little bit of time now so that you don't have the problems later on which you don't know how to deal with.
Thank you. Crystal clear. Bora.
Yes, just a quick comment to that. So our understanding is that there was a need for bilateral agreements. So that is what we have based our business on. Then, as part of the process, we learned within EU, we start hearing rumors a while back that it wasn't needed, and that's been very strongly confirmed. We have a very constructive and good dialogue with the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Norway. We know they are working on it. There are certain things they would like to see, but they are also assuring us that there is progress made. So our hope from a business perspective is that we are either told it's not needed, or there is a bilateral or something else that is in its place, so that we can take this out of our contracts and carry on. I don't know so much about pipeline, but I think what you said, I think that is a more, because shipping is also regulated, of course, under the international maritime law. So there is already a quite sophisticated legal framework for carrying out trade. Whereas for pipeline, I do think it's customary with bilateral agreements for pipelines, but I'm not an expert on the CO2, but I think there is probably a case to be at least looked into.
The pipelines so far are bilateral, but it doesn't take into account the transit states. And I think the transit states should be included in this principle as well. May I make another problem?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
May I make another problem? It is a question I don't have an answer to, and maybe someone of you have it. So then I pick your brains. Ships are now, as of 2025, I think, subject to emissions trading. So they need an emissions permit to ship CO2. But I can see that maybe there could be an incident or an accident. And if this ship is also transporting CO2, and that CO2 is then escaping, would that emitted CO2 be then subject under the same CO2 emission permit you have to sail the ship, or do you need a separate CO2 emission permit? No? Under the same permit? Oh, yeah, I don't know.
There's someone who definitely knows the answer there. Just pass the microphone to the lady who is absolutely 100% certain she knows the answer to this. Legally binding response coming at you. Right.
And could you state your name and where you're coming from?
Hi, my name's Lean and I work at the Environmental Agency of Iceland. And in the Annex 1 of the ETS directive, which was just renewed in end of 2023, I think, it says that transport of carbon dioxide needs a emission permit, but it says that if it is, it has a permit according to some of the other activities in the annex, then it does not need a specific permit, so that the other permit covers it. So yeah.
Someone for the panel for the next one.
Yeah.
Do we have any other things we want to clarify here?
And for our closing keynote speech. Yeah, let's open up for questions. Yeah, there's another lady just there.
So thank you for the presentations and very interesting discussions. I'm Lemoniata Aruja. I work for IMA at ESA and I work in the transport unit. So I do have a few answers on shipping. That's been mentioned a few times, but I think more in terms of questions than in terms of answers. Let me reassure you that in terms of how the ships operate, there's a tradition in them being certified before they can operate. So when it's easier than the pipelines indeed, and they cannot go out unless they are certified environmentally as well. And this is verified in the EEA through port state control, flag state. So we do monitor how this is done. That is not to say that there aren't complex legal questions, as Professor Hogenkamp has mentioned more than once today. So I have one that stems from my original knowledge of law of the sea and how these questions were addressed back some 30 years ago by Church and Law and CCS and transport of CCS and injection of CCS and of CO2 into the seabed. And I was wondering, first of all, if that has now been clarified, because to my knowledge, UNCLOS hasn't changed and law of the sea hasn't changed, and still transforming one type of pollution into another is still prohibited. And the EEA just a few years ago was still saying, EEA meaning the European Environmental Agency, that we cannot know what the effects of injecting CO2 into the seabed are 100% for the deep sea organisms, for instance. That is just to mention one. So that is one aspect, and I was wondering, perhaps there's been legal analysis clarifying this question, because I distinctly remember them saying it's not defined what is injection of CO2 into the seabed as a matter of law? And the second question I had is for insurance. Liability was mentioned in the first panel. So since we have been discussing regulation in this one, I was wondering if one of you could answer, what does the liability insurance for permit holders cover in the case of CCS permit holders? And is it then also covering ELD risks, because there's no cap to them? And for shipping, for instance, there is a cap. I could go on and on. There's very technical things. I don't want to exhaust the panel or the audience, but thank you anyway for offering the possibility to add.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to grapple with any of those?
Yeah, maybe I'll start and I'll hand over to you, because there were certainly some things there that is. This starts to look like a day in the office, because these are the questions that come up all the time when you're doing something new and you have to figure out the answers. And it could be VAT, it could be legal, it could be technical specifications, it can be operational issues. Many people ask, why did it take so long time from we announced the Yara deal till we actually finalized it? And that was because we were into these weeds. We had agreed all the main items between us, but actually sorting out all these details took a lot of time. So I think it is challenging. There is no insurance to buy out there for CO2 cargoes. There are no insurance we can take out for storing CO2 under the seabed in Norway. But we talk to insurance companies, they are very interested, and they will most likely be able to provide those kind of insurances. But again, it's something that we are developing as we speak. And I think it's, in my mind, it shouldn't be very hard to insure a cargo of CO2, because at the end of the day, if you should be really, really unlucky and you have a leak from your ship, it's at the end of the day, it's only CO2. Yeah, it's not that. There's a lot of more dangerous cargoes than CO2 being shifted around our sea routes. So I think it should be fairly perfectly okay to get an insurance for it, but it's not there yet. On this question on the pollution, I thought that was sorted by the London Protocol, but I could be simplifying things. But Marta, you may have more on that part of the question.
Not on the pollution side, but I mean, I think what interesting part is you mentioned about the UNCLOS, the law of the sea. And of course, the law of the sea provides whether a coastal state have a competence to regulate certain activities. And of course, CO2 storage is not oil and gas production. So it means that it is not sufficient that a coastal state has a continental shelf. You need to have to declare an exclusive economic zone. And then the question is, what are then the activities you can use or you can apply on the exclusive economic zone? Well, that is developing energy and other economic activities. And we had in 2009, when we wrote this book, this enormous discussion, is actually CO2 storage an economic activity? Because you're not earning money with it, is it? Well, some at least you need to store it. So, but I mean, now everyone assumes it is an economic activity. So if you have your exclusive economic zone, that would mean that you still would be allowed to actually develop that activity and regulate the activity. And of course, when you talk about pipelines, then you get into the issue again that to which extent is a pipeline subject to a coastal state's regulation, if it is a transit pipeline, or is that just the freedom of the high seas that everyone can lay a pipeline, and then we come in a completely different story again, which I will not bother you with now.
Thank you.
Yeah, just maybe a bit of a fun fact on your question on the fact that we're investing in something when we didn't know it was going to be a business. So the accountants and the auditors, they had a heyday, because if you have a business, if you're investing in something that doesn't make money, are you then allowed to take tax deduction? Are you allowed to, or do you just need to write off all your investment every year, 100%? And what about the VAT? So I can assure you, we were able to convince them in after a lot of time that we actually think we're going to make money on this someday. So please let us continue. And but we did have to do some write-offs, but that was a separate story. But it takes time.
Siren.
Yes, regarding insurance and whether CO2 is dangerous or not. Maybe, well, insurance is not the problem solver for that, I think. CO2 is a huge problem to humanity, to the Earth today. So we have lost the opportunity to capture it, to mineralize it if it's lost in transport. So that's a serious problem, of course. So we need this technology to be really, really safe. I just wanted to make that remark.
Thank you. Take one more question. If there's, yes, in the front.
Hello, hi, my name is Hildur. I'm from the EFTA Surveillance Authority. First of all, thank you all for a fascinating panel. I have a short and sweet question to round this off. Sigrun, you mentioned earlier that when we are dealing in new fields, there's a tendency to want a European opinion. And I just wanted to mention that in the CCS directive, there is foreseen the possibility for the Commission or the EFTA Surveillance Authority to actually not issue an opinion and to indicate within 1 month of receiving a draft storage permit that it will not issue an opinion, to give reasons for that. As we gain experience in this field, do you consider that it's reasonable for the European authorities to do that at some point? And if so, how much experience do you think we need in this field before that can become a viable option?
Interesting fact, yes. I don't know how much experience, but if the technology is the same, we should consider this fact. We've been discussing today how strong the legislation is supposed to be. We want it neutral, technological neutral, and it should be strong enough and flexible enough. This is a balanced exercise for us all to work together on. That's the short answer.
Janina?
Yeah, just I wanted to point something quite beautiful to you, Hildur, which I discovered when reading the directive and the preamble to the recitals to the directive. It says that the Commission, which we of course read ESA, should give an opinion, and they name 2 reasons for that. One is to ensure consistency, but the other one came to my heart, and that is the review should help to enhance public confidence. Liked it.
Excellent. On that note, we'll draw this one to a close. We've still got final statements, which I'll ask the MC to come up, but I'd just like to ask you to thank the panel in the usual way. Thank you.